Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, Somalia, Mozambique, Namibia, Senegal, Morocco, and Tunisia. 10% of the original 60,000 of Yaqub's followers betrayed Yaqub and jumped ship. 85% of the original 60,000 of Yaqub's followers jumped ship because they were confused why he would do such a horrible thing, leaving only 5% of the original 60,000 of Yaqub's followers who actually made it to their destination of the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea. As king on his island, Yaqub set up birth control and Planned Parenthood laws which would contribute to his plan of negative eugenics and genocide to breed his albinoid tribe. Yaqub made it a law that only the lighter complexion people could have children. People with darker complexions were put to death, and when children were born, nurses were ordered to have the darker babies killed by pricking the brains with a sharp needle as soon as the child's head was out of the mother, but the lighter babies were allowed to live. Yaqub's aim was to kill and destroy the Ebenoid nation. Yaqub would have the dead bodies of the darker babies fed to wild beasts, and if they could not find a wild beast to feed the bodies to, they would take the dead bodies of the babies to a cremator to be burned. This is the level of intense hatred Yaqub had in his heart. This process went on for years on Yaqub's island as Yaqub trained his sons and grandsons to carry on his work after he died. Yaqub died at the age of 150 years old from a brain tumor. As the father of technology, Yaqub taught his people a doctrine which would enable them to rule the world for 6,000 years. Yaqub also taught his people that God is a spirit and a spook and not a man, and Yaqub was the founder of the doctrine that unalike attracts and like repels. After 200 years on Yaqub's island, all of the darker babies had been done away with, and all babies were born of a new tribe called the Rubedoid tribe. After another 200 years, all babies were born of an even newer tribe called the Citrinoid tribe. And finally, after another 200 years, which makes 600 years total, all the babies born on Yaqub's island were of Yaqub's desired albinoid tribe. It took 600 years to breed Yaqub's albinoid tribe, and every imagination of their heart and all of their actions were wicked continuously. The evilness of the albinoids not only affected themselves, but also affected the other peoples of the world. Yaqub's albinoids returned to the city where they were exiled from. Once back in the city, it took only 6 months for Yaqub's albinoids to cause chaos and war amongst the Ebenoid people. The king of the Ebenoid people realized that it was Yaqub's albinoids who were causing all the trouble, and the king made a decree to drive Yaqub's evil albinoids from amongst them. The king rounded up all of Yaqub's albinoids and stripped them of their clothing, and put an apron on them to hide their nakedness, and sent his army with them across the desert to cross the burning sands into the place which is modern-day Europe. Yaqub's albinoids were roped into the mountains and caves, and the king's army would patrol the area to make sure Yaqub's albinoids stayed in the mountains and caves for 2,000 years to ensure that these people are kept away from the Ebenoid people. During this 2,000-year period living in the mountains and caves without anything to start civilization, Yaqub's albinoids became shameless, and lost all sense of shame and started going nude, and in the winter they wore animal skins for clothes and grew hair all over their bodies and faces like all the other wild animals. Yaqub's albinoids tamed the wolves and dogs to live in the caves with them, and after some time the dog held a high place among their family, becoming their best friend. After 2,000 years of living in the caves, the wickedness of Yaqub's albinoids was observed, and an Ebenoid man named Moshe was sent to civilize them. Moshe led Yaqub's albinoids out of the caves. However, once out of the caves, Yaqub's albinoids killed Moshe. Free from the caves, Yaqub's albinoids went on a rampage throughout the earth, conquering and subjecting the Ebenoid people, pitting one against the other using the idea of divide and conquer. Yaqub's albinoids began to execute Yaqub's plan for them to rule the world for 6,000 years. A man named Mahamdu attempted to teach Yaqub's albinoids to convince them to end their devilishment. However, this was still 1,400 years before the end of Yaqub's albinoids' 6,000-year period of dominion over the earth. And so, Yaqub's albinoids ruled the earth for 6,000 years, spreading their devilishment, evil, pain, suffering, and oppression to the Ebenoid people of the earth as designed by the big head scientist Yaqub. The events of Yaqub occurred approximately 6,600 years ago, and the 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth foresaw the birth of Yaqub 15,000 years ago. This history, or future, of Yaqub and his people was predicted and foretold by the 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth 8,400 years before the birth of Yaqub. The 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth were aware of the birth of Yaqub, and they were aware of the things Yaqub would do before Yaqub was even born. The 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth predicted that in the year 8,400, this man Yaqub would be born, and when this man was born, he will change civilization in the world, and produce a new tribe of people, who would rule the original Ebenoid people for 6,000 years, from the 9,000th year to the 15,000th year. After the 6,000-year rule of Yaqub's people, the Ebenoid people would give birth to one whose wisdom, knowledge and power would be infinite. One whom the world would recognize as being the greatest and mightiest since the creation of the universe, and that Yaqub's old warring wicked world would be removed and destroyed, and the Ebenoid nation would be restored into power to rule forever and to establish a world of peace and righteousness. This great redeemer of the Ebenoid people, who was predicted by the 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth to bring balance back into the world, is known under many names, titles, and attributes, including He who has no equal, He who there never was anyone like, the Supreme Being, the Mighty, the Wise, the Best Knower, the Light, the Life Giver, the Guide, the All-Powerful, He who knows how to reproduce the universe and the people of his choice. But his mother calls him Yashmal. Yashmal was the son of Princess Radiya of the Shayuk family, and Prince Atif the Sinin family. Yashmal's parents, Princess Radiya and Prince Atif, married each other in order to establish peace between their two quarreling tribes. However, the union of Princess Radiya and Prince Atif was more than mere chance. Their union was specifically guided, selected, and arranged by the 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth, who were also genetic engineers. They knew that the offspring of the union between Princess Radiya and Prince Atif would be the personification of order to balance out and offset the chaos of Yaqub, who was the offspring of Yashak and Princess Lucina. Yashmal began his education on the day he was born, as is the custom amongst members of the Shayuk. It would be unheard of for a member of the Shayuk to wait until the age of 4 to start school unless the child was mentally handicapped. Being part Shayuk and part Sinin, Yashmal's head was noticeably larger than the other members of the Shayuk and Sinin. Yashmal had an enormous head, 2 brains, and a third enlarged pineal gland which sat in the center of his 2 brains, making the top of his head appearing to be shaped like 3 orbs. Amongst the Shayuk and Sinin, Yashmal would be called the big head scientist. However, amongst these tribes, this statement was not taken to be an insult, but rather a compliment, alluding to the individual's intelligence in the same way that saying big muscles alludes to an individual's strength. Since Yashmal was raised in his native land amongst his people who looked like him, he did not suffer from the same ridicule, mockery, and low self-esteem which plagued his cousin Yaqub, who grew up in a foreign land amongst other than self and kind. As a child, Yashmal was an exceptional prodigy and a genius. Yashmal was also told stories of the evil activities which transpired at the hands of his cousin Yaqub. One day, when Yashmal was 9 years old, he was playing with 2 electromagnets in the home of his grandfather King Fukur, and noticed that electrons flowing in the same direction through 2 electromagnets would create the magnetic phenomenon of attraction, and that electrons flowing in opposite directions through 2 electromagnets would create the magnetic phenomenon of repulsion. By observing this, Yashmal realized that like flowing energies create attraction and unlike flowing energies create repulsion. Thus, Yashmal was inspired with a determined idea to direct the flow of mental energy of the Ebenoid people of the planet in the same direction, so that the Ebenoid people of the planet will be unified again to be strong and righteous, and bring peace and balance back to the earth forever. Upon coming to this realization, Yashmal looked up at his grandfather King Fukur and said, "Grandfather, when I get older, I am going to make a people strong and righteous, and I will eliminate the devilishment which has come into the world to show and prove real power and wisdom, and bring back peace and supreme balancement forever." Grandfather King Fukur said, "What will you make? Someone to establish order and cause harmony in the world." Yashmal said, "Man plans, and I plan, and surely I am the better planner." And it was at that moment, the boy Yashmal first came into the knowledge of just who he was, born to establish order, bring peace, build, create, and be the redeemer to the Ebenoid peoples of earth. It is common for members of the Shayuk tribe to finish all of the coursework taught in all of the colleges and universities of the surface world by age 9, but Yashmal finished by age 7. If it took a member of the Shayuk tribe until age 18 to finish all of the coursework taught in all of the colleges and universities of the surface world, then that person would surely be looked at as being mentally handicapped or mentally retarded. Yashmal finished all of the advanced universal sciences which are taught by the schools in the inner earth by the time he was age 12, even though it is common to finish this coursework by age 15, but Yashmal was a genius and a prodigy. After finishing school, Yashmal met with the 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth and told them of his intention to travel to the surface world as a bringer of peace and redeemer of the Ebenoid people. Yashmal was tried and tested by the 24 wise elder scientists of the inner earth, and once found worthy, at age 18, Yashmal traveled to the area presently known as the Mwanza region near the countries of Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya in Africa. Yashmal called his new doctrine Technology, and his holy book was called the Book of Technology of 720 Degrees, which was in a question and answer format designed to get the mental energies of the listeners flowing in the same direction, which would in turn create unity, harmony, and attraction amongst kindred. Yashmal's new doctrine was so powerful that he had millions of people from all of the tribes on the earth coming to hear his message and aspiring to be a part of his mission. However, from the millions of followers that he gained on the surface of the earth, Yashmal only selected 144,000, which he called the chosen few, to be a part of the next phase of his plan, and when Yashmal and his chosen few departed, he told the people on the surface of the earth he would be back in one day. So Yashmal selected 41,150 Ebenoid females and 41,140 Ebenoid males for a total of 82,290 people from the original Ebenoid tribe. Yashmal selected 10,285 Rubedoid females and 10,285 Rubedoid males for a total of 20,570 people from the Rubedoid tribe. Yashmal selected 10,285 Citrinoid females and 10,285 Citrinoid males for a total of 20,570 people from the Citrinoid tribe. And Yashmal selected 10,285 albinoid females and 10,285 albinoid males for a total of 20,570 people from the albinoid tribe, which made 144,000 people total. Yashmal took his followers into the inner earth through an opening beneath the Great Lake in the present-day area known as the Mwanza region in Africa to begin his eugenics genetic engineering experiment of grafting the various tribes of people on the earth back into the original Ebenoid tribe. Yashmal, being a master genetic engineer who was all-wise, right, and exact, knew that it was not necessary to kill anyone in order to accomplish his goal because he had knowledge of the science of dominant and recessive genes. Knowing that the Ebenoid tribe was the first, then Yashmal knew the Ebenoid gene would be the most dominant, followed by the Rubedoid gene, followed by the Citrinoid gene, and lastly followed by the albinoid gene. While inside the inner earth with his followers, Yashmal applied the science of dominant and recessive genes to design and engineer a system of arranged marriages by which the offspring born from each arranged marriage would have certain desirable qualities, and in time, over a period of 900 years, all of the derivative tribes would have been grafted back into the original Ebenoid tribe. Yashmal also observed that the gene of the Ebenoid woman was the most dominant gene, and so Yashmal established the following rules of arranged marriages amongst his followers. 10,285 Ebenoid women and 10,285 Ebenoid men would marry to keep the Ebenoid gene strong and pure. 10,285 Ebenoid women would marry 10,285 Rubedoid men. 10,285 Ebenoid women would marry 10,285 Citrinoid men. 10,285 Ebenoid women would marry 10,285 albinoid men. 10,285 Ebenoid men would marry 10,285 Rubedoid women. 10,285 Ebenoid men would marry 10,285 Citrinoid women. 10,285 Ebenoid men would marry 10,285 albinoid women. Yashmal would also keep 10 Ebenoid women as wives for himself. The men and women were required to get married by age 19, and each couple were to have 2 children. Living in the inner earth where he was from, Yashmal was continuously regenerated and rejuvenated and did not die like his cousin Yaqub on the surface of the earth. Yashmal was able to teach, socialize, laugh, play with the children, enjoy life, and observe the generations and progression of his followers over the centuries. The offspring of the Ebenoid woman and the Ebenoid man would always be Ebenoid. The offspring of the Ebenoid woman and the Rubedoid man would also be Ebenoid because of the strength of the Ebenoid woman's genes. The offspring of the Ebenoid woman and the Citrinoid man would be Ebenoid 75% of the time, and Rubedoid 25% of the time, because of the strength of the Ebenoid woman's genes. The offspring of the Ebenoid woman and the albinoid man would be Ebenoid 75% of the time, and Citrinoid 25% of the time, because of the strength of the Ebenoid woman's genes. The offspring of the Ebenoid man and the Rubedoid woman would be Ebenoid 75% of the time, and Rubedoid 25% of the time. The offspring of the Ebenoid man and the Citrinoid woman would be Rubedoid. The offspring of the Ebenoid man and the albinoid woman would be Citrinoid. With the laws of arranged marriages in place, it would take Yashmal's chosen 144,000 people 46 generations over the course of 900 years to be grafted back into the original Ebenoid tribe.